In a previous video, I showed you this little alien guy that I sculpted as a pencil eraser. In this video, I'm going to recast him in wax, resculpt him, and turn him into a toy. I'm going to begin by making a base, and this is nothing but some leftover resin that I popped out of a cup, and I'll scrape it and sand it flat. Then it's just a matter of melting some sticky wax in place and popping the guy on there. I sticky waxed him into a nice clear cup so you guys could see the action. Then I de-aired a small batch of rubber, and now we're ready to do the pour. I deliberately didn't mix enough rubber because I wanted to make a point, and that is that you can use chunkies even in a small little mold like this. Just cut the chunks small, scaled in size to fit the mold. And this model is a really good candidate for the chunk technique because he's hard plastic, he's not fragile, doesn't have a lot of parts sticking out or blocking anything. So there's a very clear area around him that I can stuff with chunkies and use up some leftover rubber. Just top it off and we are good to go. Life got in the way and this thing's been sitting in the mold for 4 days. Let's cut it open and see how we did. It's a simple shape to remove from the mold, so I only need to cut it from one side. To cast the block for the spaceship, I lined this cup in foil, and that was one of my dumber ideas. You'll see why in a minute. When you cast wax into a mold, you have to heat the mold as well, because otherwise you're going to get voids and bubbles and weird stuff. It just doesn't work. The theory behind the foil was that it would make it easier to pop the casting out of the cup, and then I wouldn't have to cut the cup. But duh, the wax completely encapsulated the foil. So this was a total fail. I wound up having to do what I didn't want to do, which was cut the cup, and on top of all that, it made it more work because I had to be careful to machine out all of the foil that was stuck in the wax. Okay, let's start modifying this sculpture. The tool I'm using is a Fordham wax carving pen, and I really like carving wax because it's like a cross between clay sculpting and wood sculpting. It carves like wood, but you can build it up like clay. In other words, you can work both positive and negative. And I find that flexible and easy. So it's really my favorite medium to sculpt in, especially for small things. One of the great skills of carving any hard material like wood or stone is that you can't add back. Once you've cut it, it's done. You can't build back. And obviously that limits your flexibility. I've carved a lot of wood in my day, but I really love the ability to build the material back on, like working with clay. There's a story, it's probably apocryphal, but there's a story about Michelangelo. Somebody asked him, "How do you make your sculptures?" And he said it was simple. You just start with a block of marble and cut away everything that doesn't look like the sculpture. Not sure how helpful that advice is to budding sculptors, but apparently that's what he did. That's like Richard Feynman's method for solving problems. He said, think very hard and then write down the answer. He's coming right along. You can see how much progress I've made and how different he is from the original. So let's take a break from sculpting and work on the other two pieces. I want the spaceship to have a clear dome, and there's no way I'm going to fabricate or try to cast that. But I do need to determine how big to make it, so I'm drawing these concentric circles to see which is the right size. It turns out that a 40mm sphere is the right size, and I can buy packs of them from Amazon. Now I need to design the little spacecraft that our kid is zipping around in. And I'm going to fabricate that out of the foil-encrusted wax block you saw me make earlier. I can't remember the last time I machined wax. 3D printing has almost entirely taken over making mechanical parts for me. But just for nostalgia's sake, I decided to turn the flying saucer on the lathe. I forgot what a horrendous mess it is. The worst part is that if the motor gets hot, the wax sticks to the motor, even melts to the motor, and then I gotta let things cool off and scrape it all off. You might think that I could collect all these wax chips, melt and recycle them into a new block, and make new sculptures. But if you look closely, you'll see that the wax is filled with debris. In this case, it's mostly the aluminum foil that was embedded in the wax. And if you try to sculpt with wax that's full of crap, it's just not worth the hassle. So I just throw out the waste wax. You draw stuff out, but you don't know if it's going to work until you check to see. I feel like our guy here might be a little bit deep in the spaceship, but that's no problem. I can just build out the bottom of his body with some more wax. With the spaceship done, I can get on to finishing our little alien. I use a variety of smoothing tools like wire loops made from guitar string or just fine steel wire. You can get surprisingly close to a finished surface just using these tools. But for a final polish, I like to use Q-tips wrapped with very fine quadruple-aught steel wool. I dip it in lemon-scented furniture oil. As I recall, baby oil works just as well, but I like the scent of the lemons. The Q-tips also work well by themselves, both for smoothing the surface and for rubbing off the oil to dry it out. Once the overall shape is smoothed out, I come in and do the small details. I find that if you sculpt all the details and do the smoothing afterwards, you run the risk of wiping out some of the work you've done, and you don't want that. So I do the very finest work last. All right, here's our little boy, ready to go. And here you can see all the changes that I made from the original. The clear plastic spheres arrived, and I've got to say, they're a bit fiddly to put together. They fit well, and the seam isn't too obnoxious, so I think they're going to work out as well as I hoped. But I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to cut the bottoms off. It seems like the scroll saw would be a good bet because it has such a fine blade. And yeah, it does work. But even this blade is generating enough heat to melt the plastic, which tells me that we're dealing with a thermoplastic, most likely acrylic. That also tells me that the sander is as likely to melt the plastic as it is to grind it away. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happening. Still, I think it's working well enough for us to get away with it. Oh yeah, he looks great in there. I'm really pleased with the way he's turning out. Now I just have to finish out the spaceship and machine it so it fits the plastic dome reasonably well. With all that done, I can part off the ship, but I'm not going to cut it all the way because I'm afraid that it might go flying off the lathe and I won't catch it. Then I run the risk of dinging it up badly. So the best bet is to take it over to the bandsaw and just trim it off that way. After which, it's reasonably simple to scrape the bottom nice and flat. Here's our little guy ready to mold and cast. Now, I don't think of him as a Martian or a Venusian or a Saturnian or even a Jupiterian. No, it's pretty obvious to me that he's from Uranus. Here's the Hubble Space Telescope photo of Uranus, but newsflash, NASA has discovered that Uranus has rings. Bet you didn't know that. Just a little educational content for you. Hey, if you like this video, check out this video next. This channel is supported by my Patreon. Thanks to everyone that signed up. And if you want to join the fun, there's a link down below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.